In the heart of Panama's wild jungle lies a treasure drenched in blood and betrayal. Captain Henry Morgan's plunder wasn't just gold. It was a curse older than time itself. Whispers tell of men lost without a trace, swallowed by shadows and madness. The jungle is alive, a living nightmare guarding its secret fiercely. Greed awakens dark forces that turn allies into enemies and hope into despair. This is more than a hunt for fortune. It's a fight for survival against a power that will stop at nothing to protect what's buried. Will anyone escape the jungle's wrath? Or will the treasure's curse consume them all? Centuries ago, Captain Henry Morgan unleashed chaos on the city of Panama, stealing a treasure so vast and powerful that it changed the fate of all who dared to seek it. But what no one expected was the dark secret buried beneath the gold, a curse woven deep into the jungle's roots. Many who tried to claim the riches vanished without a trace, swallowed by shadows, madness, and mysterious forces beyond human understanding. This is the story of a treasure that defies time, of men torn apart by greed and fear, and a jungle that refuses to let go. Join me as we unravel the haunting legend of Henry Morgan's lost treasure, where every step forward is a step deeper into danger. The sky over Panama City burned red that January night in 1671. Spanish soldiers ran through the cobbled streets, yelling orders that no one could follow. Civilians screamed as the flames swallowed rooftops, and the air itself turned to smoke and chaos. In the harbor, Spanish galleons bobbed helplessly, stripped, looted, and blazing. At the heart of this devastation stood one man. Sir Henry Morgan, dressed in a weather-beaten coat and clutching a rusted cutlass, surveyed the city like a lion over its prey. He wasn't just a pirate. He was a privateer backed by the English crown, a sanctioned storm sent to tear through Spain's golden stronghold in the New World. But even Morgan hadn't expected this. What began as a calculated raid had become an inferno. His men, drunken, ruthless, blood-soaked, pillaged every street, church, and treasury. They found gold hidden in altar stones, silver stuffed beneath floorboards, and gems sewed into the sleeves of priests. It was more than a fortune. It was a kingdom in coin. And yet, amid the triumph, Morgan's gaze drifted toward the jungle. A voice in his head, quiet and insistent, whispered that the true danger would come after the fire. Spanish vengeance. Royal betrayal. His own men turning against him. The gold had to disappear. Somewhere the Spanish would never look. Somewhere cursed by nature itself. Somewhere deep within the heart of Panama's unforgiving green. As dawn crept over the blackened ruins of Panama City, Morgan's men counted their loot: bars of silver, golden chalices, emerald rosaries. But Morgan's mind was elsewhere. He stood at the jungle's edge, boots sunk in soft mud, staring into a green wall of vines and shadows. Beside him, his trusted quartermaster, Elias Drake, cleared his throat. "You're thinking of hiding it, out there?" Morgan didn't answer right away. His eyes narrowed. The jungle pulsed like a living beast. Chirps, rustles, and distant howls echoed through the thick mist. To most, it was a death trap. To Morgan, it was the perfect vault. "The sea is too obvious. They'll expect us to flee by ship," a Morgan said. But no man would search where no man survives. Drake hesitated. "Men vanish in that place. They say the natives won't even step deep inside. Spirits, curses." Morgan smirked, though his eyes betrayed unease. He had no fear of man or blade, but there were things in this world he didn't understand. Still, gold needed hiding. And fear was a luxury he'd abandoned long ago. By nightfall, he selected a group of his most loyal cutthroats, men who owed him their lives. They loaded crates of treasure onto mules, tied tight with tar-stained rope and marked with the seal of the crown, a lion devouring a sword. Their destination? A river trail whispered about by slaves and scouts alike. It led far into the interior, where moss-covered ruins slept beneath canopies that blocked the sky. As they set off, a young Spaniard, wounded, tied, and desperate, muttered something as they passed. "Lar Selver, no devuelve los ladrones," he spat. "The jungle does not return thieves." Morgan simply laughed, though the words clung to his thoughts like the creeping vines at his feet. The jungle swallowed them whole. Within an hour of leaving the smoldering city behind, the sounds of civilization had vanished. No sails in sight. No bell towers. Only the thick, humid breath of the forest and the eerie stillness between each step. Vines curled around their legs like fingers. Trees rose like giants, their branches tangled like ancient arms. The sun barely pierced the emerald ceiling above, casting everything in a murky green haze. Mosquitoes buzzed. Strange bird calls echoed overhead. And something else, something unseen, moved in the shadows just beyond their torchlight. Morgan's men tried to mask their unease with jokes and crude songs, but fear leaked through their grins. Every crackle of a twig sent hands to hilts. The mules, burdened with gold, grew more restless by the hour, often stopping and staring into the thickets as if sensing eyes. "Something's following us," a muttered Red Sam, a one-eyed gunner known more for rum than reason. Drake nodded. "I felt it too." Morgan said nothing. But even he felt the shift. The air was too thick. The forest too quiet. As if the jungle itself was holding its breath. That night, they made camp by a river bend, laying down bedrolls and stacking the treasure in a circle. A fire crackled in the center, but its light only seemed to deepen the darkness beyond. One man went to relieve himself behind the trees and never came back. They found his boots by a twisted root, still warm, his footprints ending abruptly in the mud. No blood. No signs of struggle. Just gone. The men whispered of spirits and forest gods. Of ancient tribes that vanished without a trace. Morgan, face hard as flint, ordered silence. "Gold doesn't wait for cowards," he snapped. But as they lay down to sleep, even Morgan couldn't ignore it. The jungle was watching. By the fourth day, the jungle began to change. The trees grew even taller, twisted, ancient, almost unnatural. Their roots rose above the ground like serpents frozen mid-slither, and the air turned damp and sour, as if the earth itself was rotting from within. The map Morgan carried was useless now. They were far beyond any known trail. Then, just before dusk, they found it. A clearing opened like a wound in the forest. At its center stood jagged stones arranged in a half-circle, their surfaces carved with symbols no man could read. Spirals, faces, open mouths with pointed teeth. Some were toppled, others coated in moss. But all of them radiated a cold, heavy stillness. "The stone teeth," whispered Elias Drake. "I've heard whispers from slaves brought over from the coast. They say this place devours what's buried here. Morgan dismounted, stepping closer. The earth beneath his boots felt soft, unnaturally so. When he plunged his cutlass into the soil, it sank like it was piercing wet ash. He turned to his men. "We dig here." No one moved. Even the bravest among them stared at the stones like they expected the carvings to blink. Red Sam clutched the wooden cross around his neck, mumbling prayers through cracked lips. One of the younger sailors dropped to his knees and begged Morgan to turn back. Morgan silenced him with a pistol shot into the air. "We burn the jungle around us. We dig, we bury. Then we're ghosts." Reluctantly, the shovels struck the earth. Hours passed. The pit widened. Sweat ran down their backs. The jungle, which had howled with life every night before, was now deathly silent. Not a single bird call. Not a single wind through the leaves. Only the sound of gold being lowered into darkness. Chest after chest, jewel after jewel. When the last crate disappeared into the earth, Morgan stood over it with a strange expression, half triumph, half dread. He removed a ring from his finger, a ruby-eyed skull, and dropped it into the hole. 4th. That night, the forest came alive in a different way. Not with the chirping of insects or the rustling of leaves, but with whispers. Faint, distant, like voices underwater. The men turned in their sleep, twitching, murmuring, sweating through feverish dreams. Morgan sat alone by the fire, sharpening his dagger, eyes locked on the jungle beyond. He had fought Spaniards, battled storms, survived betrayals from his own king, but nothing unnerved him like the silence laced with invisible breath. Then came the scream. A sharp, gurgling cry from the far edge of the camp. Torches flared. Men grabbed pistols, blades, anything. They ran toward the sound, and found the youngest crewman, Nils, with his throat slashed wide open. His eyes were frozen in terror, his hands still clutching a strand of black hair not his own. No one had seen anyone enter the camp. There were no footprints. No sign of struggle. The men were shaken. "This place ain't right," a muttered Red Sam. "That gold's cursed. We all feel it." Morgan ignored the warning and ordered the group to break camp. "We've done what we came to do. We vanish, like ghosts." But Elias Drake pulled him aside. "Henry," he whispered, eyes wary. "Men are losing it. Some say you knew this place was cursed all along. That you're feeding them to it." Morgan stared at his friend, face unreadable. "Do you believe that?" Drake didn't answer. That night, a second man vanished. No blood, no noise, just gone. The men took turns standing guard, but even the most hardened among them refused to look into the trees for too long. The jungle was no longer a place. It was a presence. Watching. Waiting. Wanting something. And by morning, Morgan realized the real battle hadn't been with Spain. It had only just begun, and it was buried under his boots. They moved at first light, hoping to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the stone teeth. But the forest had changed around them. Parts they remembered were gone. The river they camped beside had shifted, or perhaps it had never truly existed. Trees stood where there should have been clearings, and vines hung like ropes across every step. The jungle twisted their sense of direction like a drunk sailor on a spinning deck. Morgan ordered them to stay close, to trust his compass. But even the compass spun in circles. Drake walked beside him, voice tight. "I think the jungle is turning us around." "We go west," Morgan said. "We'll find the edge soon enough." But by nightfall, they hadn't made it a mile. Worse, the men were unraveling. Sleep brought nightmares, visions of drowning in black soil, of golden hands reaching from the pit. One man tried to slit his own throat with a rusted spoon. Another swore he saw Nils, the dead boy, walking beside him in the trees. Red Sam refused to carry his share of the gear anymore. "That gold's dragging us into the earth," he spat. "You saw what happened to the ones who touched it too long." Morgan silenced him with a blow, but the fear had already taken root. That night, Morgan awoke to shouting. 3 men had vanished from their bedrolls. No sound, no struggle, just gone. One of the remaining crew found blood on his boots, even though he'd done nothing. "You cursed us, Morgan," he hissed. Elias Drake stepped between them before blades were drawn, but the air was thick with mutiny. No one trusted anyone, and no one dared sleep alone. By morning, the only certainty was this: the jungle had them, and it would not let them go. The rain came without warning, thick, warm, and relentless. It soaked the men to the bone and turned the ground beneath their boots into a soup of mud and rot. Trees groaned under the weight of water. Lightning cracked above the canopy, illuminating the forest in brief flashes that looked almost unnatural. Faces in bark, twisted limbs in vines. They stumbled forward, desperate for shelter, when one of the mules slipped and fell into a pit. The beast screamed, flailing. When they dragged it out, Morgan noticed what lay just beyond the collapsed earth. Stone steps. Not like the crude markers they'd seen earlier. These were deliberate. Wide. Carved into the hillside and descending into darkness. Drake brushed away moss from a slab nearby and read the glyphs etched into the face. Jaguars, skulls, spirals, and a man being devoured by trees. "This is no ruin," he muttered. "It's a tomb." Morgan's eyes narrowed. Or a warning. But warnings meant little now. The rain had flooded their supplies. The men were starving, on edge, and close to breaking. Shelter was shelter, even if it came from the grave. They descended. The steps led into a cavernous chamber, half swallowed by roots. The air was thick with age, still and choking. Bones lay scattered across the floor, animal, human, some neither. A large altar sat at the center, carved in obsidian and gold. But it wasn't empty. There, resting in the dust, was a golden idol, a jaguar-headed figure clutching a ruby the size of a man's fist. Red Sam reached for it without hesitation. "Don't," Drake began, but it was too late. The moment his fingers touched the idol, the walls echoed with a low groan, like stone grinding against stone. Vines dropped from the ceiling like nooses. One of the men screamed, thrashing as a root wrapped tight around his leg and dragged him into the dark. The rest bolted. Only Morgan remained still, staring at the idol in Red Sam's hands. The ruby pulsed, and somewhere deep beneath their feet, they fled the temple like men chased by fire. The moment they breached daylight, Red Sam collapsed to the ground, gasping and clutching the idol as though it were the only real thing left in the world. The others surrounded him, faces gaunt, eyes wild. "We're cursed," one of the crew growled. "Ever since we buried that gold. And now he brings back the devil's toy," spat another, pointing at the ruby-eyed idol. Morgan raised his pistol. "You want to die out here, bickering like dogs? Or do you want to make it out rich?" No one answered. But something had shifted. Red Sam wouldn't let go of the idol. He clutched it even while eating, while sleeping, while marching. His skin began to pale, and his hands trembled even when still. He spoke less, stared more, sometimes, at nothing. By the next morning, he was dead. No wounds, no fever. Just lying in his bedroll, stiff as stone, the idol still in his arms. Morgan ordered the idol buried immediately. But when Elias Drake tried to pull it from Sam's hands, they broke apart like brittle porcelain, crumbling into dust. The men stood frozen. Drake, white-faced, dropped the idol into a nearby ravine and crossed himself. That night, the mutiny began. It started with whispers. Men speaking in hushed tones, always glancing at Morgan. Then, as the camp slept, 3 crept toward him with blades drawn. Morgan, half awake and fully dangerous, shot the first before he reached the tent flap. The second slashed his arm before Drake intervened, running the attacker through. The third vanished into the jungle. By morning, the survivors were few, and trust was gone. Drake wrapped Morgan's arm in silence, his hands shaking. "This gold is poison, Henry. Whatever we touched, it's awake now. And it doesn't want us to leave." Morgan stared into the trees, jaw tight. "Then we leave it behind," he growled. "The jungle can keep its ghosts." But even as he said it, part of him knew. They were already part of the legend. They ran. There was no plan, no path, only a desperate push through vines and thorns, away from the temple, away from the pit where Morgan's gold now slept beneath cursed earth. Rain poured in sheets, and roots tore at their boots. The jungle had become a labyrinth of shifting paths, each step pulling them deeper instead of out. It was as if the forest was folding in on itself. One by one, the men fell behind. First it was Keller, screaming as something dragged him into the underbrush, his rifle clattering against the stones. Then Tom, who simply vanished during a rest stop, his satchel still resting against a tree as if he'd evaporated mid-breath. Morgan and Drake pushed forward, bleeding, mud-covered, their eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Only 4 others remained, and none spoke unless forced. Each looked over their shoulder more than they looked ahead. At one point, they stumbled into a clearing none of them remembered crossing before. In its center stood a single tree, twisted, blackened, its bark scorched. And hanging from it by jungle vines was Red Sam. His face was contorted in a silent scream. His hands clutched the idol again, though they'd thrown it into a ravine days before. The men stood frozen. "No," one of them muttered, backing away. "This isn't real. It's the forest. It's playing with us." But Morgan stepped forward, teeth clenched. "Burn it." They set the tree ablaze. Flames rose high, illuminating the horror before being swallowed by the mist again. When the smoke cleared, nothing remained. No tree, no body, no idol. The forest had erased it. And yet, every man there felt it, something watching. Not from the trees, from beneath them. The ground pulsed like a heartbeat. They pressed on, but it was no longer about escaping with treasure. It wasn't even about surviving. It was about not being claimed, not being buried. Morgan gripped his blooded cutlass tighter. This was no longer a retreat. It was a war against the jungle itself. By some cruel miracle, or perhaps fate, they stumbled upon a river. It slithered through the jungle like a silver thread, its current slow but steady. Morgan dropped to his knees at the bank, cupping the water in trembling hands. It was clean, cold, real. "We follow it," he rasped. "Rivers lead to the sea." The others, barely more than shadows of the men they had been, nodded in silence. One wept openly, whispering to God through cracked lips. Another simply stared at his reflection, not recognizing his own hollow eyes. They built a crude raft from fallen logs and bound it with vines. By dawn, they drifted downstream, the river cutting through walls of green. The current was calm. Too calm. For a moment, just a moment, it felt like salvation. Then came the first scull. It bobbed past them gently in the current. Then another. And another. Soon, the river was full of bones, floating ribs, femurs, even shattered jawbones, tangled in reeds like flowers left by mourning hands. "No one ever left this way," Drake whispered. The river narrowed into a gorge. The walls rose high on either side, covered in thick moss and ancient carvings, faces with open mouths, screaming silently into the void. The air was colder here. Heavy. Then, the raft struck something. A submerged branch, or so they thought. But when Morgan reached into the water, he found not wood, but stone. Smooth, shaped, and unmistakably man-made. An altar. The current dragged them forward, but the altar remained beneath them, visible just long enough for them to read the glyphs carved into its surface. "Blood opened the path," Drake read aloud. "Only blood may seal it." As if on cue, one of the men on the raft began to convulse. His skin blistered. His mouth foamed. Within seconds, he collapsed, dead before he hit the floor. The others recoiled in horror. But Morgan's eyes remained on the altar. It hadn't been a warning. It had been a demand. Something had been awakened beneath that gold. The raft drifted into darkness. The river, narrow and cruel, funneled them into a gaping mouth in the cliffside, an unseen cave hidden behind hanging moss. By the time they realized, it was too late to turn back. The current had them. Torches flickered weakly as they lit them. The walls were slick and pulsing with moisture, veins of quartz glowing faintly under the torchlight like nerves beneath skin. "Where the hell are we?" one whispered. Morgan said nothing. The tunnel widened into a chamber. Here, the ceiling rose high above, and the river slowed around the edge of a black stone platform. On the walls were carvings, massive, ancient, half erased by time and water. Not of men, but of creatures, twisted, horned, part beast, part human, all bearing a single symbol on their chests, a jagged spiral etched in gold. At the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. It held no treasure, no gold, only a bowl, carved from obsidian and filled with something darker than water. Blood? Ink? Time itself? Elias Drake moved first. This is no temple. It's a gate, a Morgan finished, voice low. And it was never meant to be opened. A rumble answered him, low and guttural. The chamber vibrated. The river hissed as it retreated, shrinking around them like a dying breath. The stone beneath their feet glowed faintly. The bowl on the pedestal began to stir. And from the dark behind them came a voice. Not in words, not in sound, but in thought. You stole from the roots of the world. Now it remembers you. The torches went out. Morgan had faced death before, on stormy seas, in burning cities, with a sword to his throat and cannonballs raining from above. But this was different. This was something older than death. As they backed away from the altar, the chamber seemed to breathe. The walls pulsed with a heartbeat too deep to be human. The glyphs, once still, shifted ever so slightly under the flickering torchlight, as if watching them. We need to move, a Drake grasped, dragging the whispering crewmen behind him. Now! They followed the riverbank through a narrow stone corridor, carved not by hands but by intention, like the earth had split itself open for something to crawl through long ago. The spiral symbol appeared again and again, growing larger, bolder, carved deeper into the walls. Drake muttered, the spiral isn't a mark, oh, it's a map. Morgan turned to him sharply. A map to what? But Drake didn't answer. The air turned colder. Wet. A distant echo rose from behind them, a chorus of low, wet clicks. Footsteps? Bones? No one dared look back. Then they saw it. A shaft of light. Faint, pale, like moonlight through mist. It poured down from a crack high above, illuminating a narrow stone stairway, spiraling upward. The last man fell to his knees, laughing and crying at once. We're out, we're out. But Morgan's instincts screamed. Don't touch the steps, he warned. Too late. The man rushed forward, feet hitting the bottom step, and froze. For a split second, he seemed suspended in place, his body taut and trembling. Then he screamed, a howl of pure agony, as veins of gold cracked through his skin, traveling like lightning across his limbs. In seconds, his body was consumed, turned into a statue of molten ore. Then he shattered. Silence fell. Drake turned slowly toward Morgan. The spiral isn't a way out, he said. It's a seal. A warning. Morgan stared at the glowing stairs. A way forward? Or the final trap? He had led them here. Buried the treasure. Ignored ever. The spiral staircase loomed before them, lit only by the cold shaft of moonlight. It felt impossibly old, worn not just by time, but by the weight of forgotten souls. Each step radiated a faint hum, like it remembered the touch of every foot that had dared climb it. Morgan and Drake stood at the threshold, breathless. We have to go, Drake said quietly. We either climb or stay here and die. Morgan hesitated. The memory of the man turning to gold haunted him. But behind them, something stirred, a soft dragging sound, like wet ropes being pulled across stone. With no other choice, they stepped onto the first stair. It didn't crack. It didn't glow. Just silence. They took another. And another. But the higher they climbed, the louder the whispers became. At first, they sounded like echoes of the wind. But then the voices took shape. Names. Please. Warnings. Henry, turn back. They will never let it go. Gold is a promise or a price. Morgan gritted his teeth and climbed faster. The staircase coiled tighter as it rose, closing in like a serpent wrapping around their resolve. The stone walls began to bleed light, tiny golden veins glowing from within, as if the treasure had seeped into the bones of the mountain itself. Then the steps shifted. Not down, but sideways. The staircase twisted, and suddenly they were walking along the wall, defying gravity. The world bent around them, reality unraveling. Drake stumbled, eyes wide. It's not just cursed, it's alive. Morgan felt it too. The stairs were no longer stairs. They were choices. Each one leading not to a door, but to a different fate. And at the top, there a golden gate. Beyond it, he could see light, but also shadows. Tall, watching, waiting. As they reached the final steps, Morgan turned to Drake. If we open that gate, we don't go back. Drake nodded, his voice thin. Wasn't planning to. Morgan pushed. The gate groaned open, spilling gold light onto their faces, and revealing not a tunnel. The chamber breathed. It wasn't a trick of the mind. Morgan felt it. The walls expanded and contracted ever so slightly, like lungs inhaling secrets. Vines hung from the ceiling like veins, pulsing with a golden sap that dripped into small stone bowls circling the room. The air shimmered with a strange warmth, neither comforting nor hostile, just watching. At the center of the chamber sat a pedestal carved from black stone, veined with gold. Upon it lay an object wrapped in weathered cloth, humming softly. Around it, the floor was etched with concentric circles, symbols that pulsed as if responding to their steps. Drake took one look and whispered, "This isn't treasure." "No," Morgan agreed. "It's something older." He stepped forward and peeled back the cloth. Underneath was a heart. Not a human one. It looked forged, yet organic, crafted from gold but beating faintly, as if it still remembered what it was like to be alive. As Morgan stared, visions exploded behind his eyes. He saw an ancient city swallowed by the jungle, kings crowned in shadows, and rituals where this heart, the heart of El Oro Maldito, was fed the greed of men until it pulsed with dark power. A relic not of wealth, but of desire itself. It had been buried here long before Panama ever rose. Long before Morgan ever dreamed of conquest. And then he understood, the gold in Panama, it wasn't collected by men. It was drawn by the heart. Every coin, every gem, every ounce of treasure, it all found its way here, pulled by a force that fed on want. Morgan had not burned Panama for greed. He'd been guided to do it. manipulated by the heart's ancient call. "No wonder the jungle won't let this go," a drake said. "It's not about gold. It's about power." Morgan felt his own heartbeat slow, syncing with the rhythm of the heart. His fingers itched to touch it, to claim it. But some part of him still resisted. He stepped back, and the chamber groaned in response. The vines tightened. The air turned to az. Morgan's breath came in ragged gasps as the chamber trembled. The vines, now like serpents, coiled around the walls and floor, squeezing the life from the ancient stones. The heart pulsed wildly, a sinister rhythm echoing in his chest. It was calling to him, promising power beyond any king's dreams, glory to rule not just the seas but fate itself. Elias Drake grabbed Morgan's arm, voice desperate. "We can't take it with us. If we do, this curse will follow us till death." Morgan looked down at the golden heart, then back at the closing doorway. "This is more than treasure. It's a curse bound to desire itself." A flash of memory stabbed him, faces of men lost to greed, his own crew falling one by one, the jungle claiming them all. He raised his cutlass, trembling but resolute. "We bury it deeper." Drake nodded. Together, they pushed the heart back into its pedestal. The ground rumbled harder, but the vines began to retreat, loosening their grip. The chamber door ground open, spilling moonlight once more. Morgan staggered out, weary but alive. The jungle seemed to sigh, as if appeased. Morgan and Drake emerged from the jungle's grasp, the cool night air a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the tomb. The stars shone indifferent overhead, as if nothing had shifted in the heart of Panama. The treasure was buried, the heart sealed away, but the cost was etched into every scar, every weary breath. Morgan's men, what few remained, looked to him not as a captain, but as a man who had stared into the abyss and lived. Word would spread. Whispers of a raid. Of gold lost beneath the jungle. Of curses older than any crown. Morgan knew the truth was darker. The gold would remain, waiting. The jungle would keep its promise. Those who seek it are forever marked. And far from the eyes of men, deep in the silent earth, the heart pulsed quietly, still hungry, still alive. Decades passed, and Panama rebuilt itself from ashes, but the jungle never forgot. Travelers, treasure hunters, and adventurers whispered of the cursed gold hidden deep in the wild. Some sought fortune, others, glory. Few returned. Those who did spoke of shadows lurking just beyond the tree line. Strange lights flickering in the night. And eerie disappearances, men vanishing without trace, swallowed by the unforgiving green. Local tribes warned outsiders in hushed tones. The jungle takes those who greed blinds. Stories surfaced of a golden heart seen beating beneath the earth, pulsing in rhythm with the lost souls it claimed. Morgan's name became legend, part warning, part myth. And though centuries have passed, the curse remains, patiently waiting for the next greedy hand to reach for the treasure that was never meant to be. In the dense shadows of Panama's jungle, a new figure moved cautiously, a man with weathered boots, a worn leather satchel, and eyes sharp like a hawk's. Lucas Moreno was no stranger to danger. A treasure hunter obsessed with legends, he'd spent years chasing whispers of Morgan's lost gold. Maps, old diaries, and native stories had led him here, to to the edge of the jungle where the past and present blurred. The air was thick, humid, and charged with a strange energy. Every step felt heavier, as if the jungle itself resisted his presence. Local guides refused to go further, warning of the curse that still guards the heart. But Lucas was determined. The promise of untold wealth and the lure of the unknown outweighed fear. At night, as the jungle came alive with eerie calls and shifting shadows, he camped near ancient ruins, the same ruins Morgan's men had once stumbled upon centuries ago. And somewhere deep beneath the soil, the heart pulsed, waiting. Lucas lit a fire, pulled out a faded journal, and read the last line written by an explorer long vanished. "Beware the greed that binds the gold, for it is the jungle's own soul, and it never forgets." He smiled grimly. "This time, it's my turn." With dawn breaking through the dense canopy, Lucas tightened his grip on the satchel strap and plunged deeper into the jungle's embrace. Every sound was amplified: the snap of a twig, the distant cry of unseen creatures, the slow drip of water from swollen leaves. His guide's warnings echoed in his mind, but his resolve remained steel. Ancient trees towered above, their roots twisting like serpents across the forest floor. The air grew thick with the scent of damp earth and something metallic, an unseen reminder of the treasure hidden below. Hours passed as Lucas followed faint trail markers, carvings on stone, broken branches arranged in silent patterns, leading him toward the legendary stone teeth. Suddenly, a chill ran down his spine. A soft whisper seemed to drift on the breeze, almost like a warning. "Turn back." Lucas shook his head, pushing forward. The jungle closed in tighter, shadows deepening. Ahead, the twisted stones of the ancient altar rose, moss-covered and foreboding. His heart pounded, not from exertion, but from something else. The jungle was watching, waiting, and the heart beneath was stirring once more. Lucas stepped into the clearing, heart pounding like a war drum. The stone teeth loomed around him, silent sentinels guarding secrets older than time. He approached the altar, the same one where Morgan's crew had buried their cursed gold centuries ago. The air was thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken promises. With trembling hands, Lucas reached into his satchel and pulled out a small golden locket, an heirloom passed down from his ancestors, said to be connected to Morgan himself. As he placed it on the altar, the ground trembled beneath his feet. The jungle seemed to exhale, shadows twisting into shapes, faces of lost souls, silent warnings etched into the air. A low rumble grew into a roar. Vines surged forward, wrapping around roots and stones, revealing a hidden passage beneath the altar. Lucas hesitated only for a moment before descending into the darkness. Below, in a cavern lit by a pulsating golden light, rested the heart, still beating, still alive, still hungry. He knew the truth now. The treasure came at a cost. The heart demanded sacrifice, greed's final toll. As Lucas reached out to claim it, a voice echoed in his mind. "The jungle remembers. The price must be paid." His fingers closed around the heart's cold surface. The cavern shook, and Lucas understood. Legends never die. They only wait for the next story.